Hello, 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 and welcome again to Lapsy Chess. It's been like 2 months plus, maybe. Yeah, it's been a while I made a video. So much has been going on. So many tournaments, so many events. Uh, I personally participated in like few tournaments. There was the zonal, Zone 4.4 Chess Championship, Lagos, Nigeria, and also there was the National Friends of Chess Championship, which were very tough tournaments. And I was able to do perform well to some extent based on my rating. I think I gained about 57 rating points. Anyway, like I said, so many things has been going on. Big apologies that I haven't really put any videos out there like that for a while. Um, I know you all miss me and I miss me too. So, but the African Individual Chess Championship just ended. I think few maybe yesterday, and we actually have a new African Individual Chess Champion. And the African Individual Chess Champion has pretty much been dominated by the Egyptians for like so many years. I think the last 10 um, events were won by the Egyptians. But there's a new king in town right now. The most recent one, which, like I said, just finished a few days ago, was won by the Algerian BL, Grandmaster BL, who was he's been based in France for a long time, but then of course changed to Algeria. Of course, I think his parents are Algerian, but I think he was born in France, something like that. So it was a three-way tie, and the interesting thing, it could actually have gone to any of the other Egyptians because he tied with the other two seeds, which was Basim, and Ahmed Hadley. And it was a three-way tie, and the Algerian came out ahead. And you could see in the picture that I have um, right here. That's the GM from Algeria. That's Basim, and of course the female champions as well, Wafa. Interestingly, it's interesting to see that Adli actually tied for first position, despite the fact he lost a very careless game. I would say. I think he lost to 2100, and we're about to actually check out that game. I mean, it's this was a completely drawn position, but the GM just kind of pretty much went crazy. Like, I'm just going to try and win a game that is totally, totally drawn. No signs of any life. But the GM said, well, I'm going to just, go ahead and try and make things happen. Unfortunately, things didn't go his way. So let's get right into the video. It was an Alapin opening the GM's opponent was, what's this guy's name again? His name is Ala Eddine. I'm not sure what country he's from, but I can always put that in the I can always put that in the video. So his rating is actually 2136. So the game went like this: e4, c5, c3, the Alapin variation. Of course, we know the Alapin variation. The idea of white here is trying to build a pawn center. You want to have those two pawns just taking control of every square, and Black plays e6. This is kind of a rare line against the Alapin. Normally, the most played line is the d5 line, where it takes back, and we have the move d4. And then another line that is normally played is the line knight f6. Pretty much provokes this pawn to more, knight comes to d5 and all that. So, but in this case, the GM played e6. And this e6 looks as if it's trying to transpose into the advanced version of the French. So let's keep going. e4, c5, c3, e6, knight f3, knight to c6, d4. Of course, white goes ahead to play d4. That's the original plan anyway, to have two strong pawns in the center. d4 is played. We have d5, captures on d5, captures back the pawn. Bishop to d3. Of course, the idea of the bishop to d3 is to put the bishop on the most active square and then get this king into safety ASAP. Bishop goes to g4, castles, bishop to d6. The GM is just pretty much trying to get his pieces, best square as possible. Knight ge7 is possible. Knight f6 is possible. Would I really see any advantage for anybody right here, apart from the fact that white is already castled and he actually can start some, active operations. But yeah, I think he has to get these guys in the game first. So rook e1 check, knight ge7, takes on c5. bishop takes back. Now, white has been able to give black an isolated pawn. This is kind of ironic because in the Alapin, it's actually white that gets saddled with the isolated pawn. But now in this position, it is black that has the isolated pawn. So, and whenever you have an isolated pawn, there has to be a line of play. With an isolated pawn, you're pretty much trying to blockade the pawn and trying to capture the pawn at some point. Now, if you're playing with if you're the one with the isolated pawn, you have to try to create some attacking possibilities on your opponent's position, especially the king. So bishop e3 is played. Makes a lot of sense. Bishop e3, you try to remove one of the pieces that's putting pressure on the square in front of the isolated pawn. Bishop takes, rook captures, h6. No idea why that move went to h6. Probably the idea is if he castles, bishop takes check, king takes, knight g5 check, followed by queen g4 check, and black is just busted. So he says, like, I'm going to move my pawn to h6. I'm not going to castle yet because of the potential bishop takes h7 check. So knight bd2. I really like white's position. All the pieces are developed. Although the rook is looking a little weird on that screen, but all the pieces are now with the move knight bd2, the queen can be freed either to b3 or to a4, so that rook can come to e1. Just put pressure. Black is already, I would say black is already strong, but let me see what the engine thinks. Yeah, the engine says, hey, Dapsy, you're right. Black is already slightly worse, not losing, but slightly worse. So knight bd2 is played. We have castles. Queen to a4. The obvious move. It takes g4. So bishop goes to d7, moving away from the threat from the queen, creating his own discovery threat. White said, I'm not impressed. You can go ahead and throw the knight wherever you want. I'll be waiting for you. So rook goes to c8, knight b3, rook to c7. Now, I think white's just better here. Why? Let me break it down. Black has an isolated pawn. Like I said earlier, anytime you have an isolated pawn, you have to look to create play. You have to look to create play on your opponent's position. Most likely, the king's position. You have to try and create some attack. If you don't have an attack and you have an isolated pawn, it's just a matter of time you're going to get busted. White's position looks really good. He has a strong clamp on the square in front of the isolated pawn. What do I mean by that? There's a queen. Sorry, excuse me. There's the queen looking on d4, 1. Knight on b3 looking on d4, 2. Pawn on c3, 3. Knight on f3, 4. So we have 4 strong pieces looking on d4. So that means black can never push that pawn. And of course, you know what that means? That's a backward pawn. So white's plan is pretty much simple here. Stop the advance of this pawn. Even white can even try to create play on this diagonal. But I think the most logical move is just to try to put pressure on this pawn and capture this pawn at some point in time. So queen f4 is played. I saw that queen f4 gaining as much space, keeping an eye on that square. Has an eye here, has an eye here. Keep an eye on that square. Still keeping an eye on the d4 square. So bishop goes to c8, knight to d4. Yeah, that's what your plan is. When there's an isolated pawn, put a piece in front of it so that the piece doesn't have anywhere to move to. So knight d4 is played. The pawn cannot move anywhere. Rook d7. Black's position is really, really weird. Like bishop on c8, rook on d7. Rooks have very unclosed files, not doing anything compared with the white's rook. So like I said, it's a matter of time. White should really score a win in this position. So let's see how this game continued. Knight to f5, trying to create some play on the king's side. What exactly is the knight threatening right now? Nothing much. Well, let's see. Is knight possible? Oh, knight h6 can be very dangerous. Knight h6, pawn takes, queen takes, followed by knight to g5, followed by rook to g3 or h3, and all of a sudden this king not looking so good. Why? Because we have the queen, we have the knight, we have the rook, and the bishop. Meanwhile, these guys are not really doing anything right now. So black has to do. I don't know if it's a good time to say black to be careful or it's already too late. But I think white still has a slight edge here. So let's see. Knight takes, bishop takes. Normally, when your opponent is cramped And I feel black's position is a little cramped here. I feel black position is a little cramped. Pieces are actually in his way. You don't normally want to exchange pieces when your opponent is cramped. You actually want them to keep those pieces and just keep pushing, bring your pieces in to try to create some threats. So knight five is played. I don't like that move so much. Takes back with the bishop. Wait a minute. What happens if queen takes? I kind of like queen takes f5, threatening checkmate. Yes, I know you're going to stop the mate, but the fact is you're going to create a weakness. That's the point. You're going to create a weakness. So, for example, g6, I can move my queen to f4, putting pressure there. Probably have to move your king. Then the knight comes to front of d4, blockade the pawn again, and it's a matter of time. I think white should win this game. So, well, in this position, black captured the bishop. I don't know why. Queen moves to f6. We have queen to g4, threatening to take twice on d7. Rook simply moves back. Bishop takes. Rook takes. Knight to e5. What's the threat? Knight d7 wins an exchange. So we have to respond to that move. Not necessarily take the knight. You don't really want to take the knight because then this pawn is just, I mean, you don't really you actually want white to take so you can take your pawn, make sure this guy is protected. Then you could try to use the b file to create some pressure on white's position. So it says, yeah, rook d8, exactly what I expected. I don't expect him to take that piece. Knight takes. Now, this is what I'm talking about. Now, it's not so bad for black any longer. Why? You don't have that isolated pawn. Instead, you have hanging pawns. What are hanging pawns? Two pawns connected that are separated by a file from each flank. Those are hanging pawns. You have two pawns that are connected, but they don't have the support of pawns either on the right flank or the left flank, or right file, the right or the left flank, whichever way you call it. Now, from an isolated pawn of an hanging pawn, an hanging pawn definitely is better than an isolated pawn. But at least you have these pawns taking care of each other. And the good thing about this B7, BC6 is because you have the B file you can use to try to start creating your own possibilities. This is a very long game, but there's good place in this game where I'm going to just go really fast. I'm not going to waste a lot of time with some very boring moves I was made in this game. So rook f3, queen goes to d6, rook to j3, threatening checkmate. Queen goes to g7, stopping checkmate. h3, very important you create a loop in this position because the background, anything can happen very, very quickly. So let's create a loft. It pretty much means you're trying to create some space, some air for your king to breathe. So in any case there's a background check, the king can slide to the square h2. So let's keep going. c5. Now, black is pretty much trying to just roll his pawns, try to get these rooks doing something. Of course, rooks are best on open files. And with the pawns on the open files, they are not really giving this rook a whole lot to do. So it's very important you move those pawns, open up the position, and try to put some pressure on white's position. So rook goes to d1, rook goes to c7, rook goes to d3. This is very obvious. There's a lot of pressure on d3, not on d5. It's b4. Now, this is another interesting idea. The idea is if you take and I take, now this pawn becomes an isolated pawn. I have two against one, which should win it. This pawn is just, it's going to give black a lot of problems. I can always blockade the pawn, switch the rook to the king side, try to create some possibilities on this side. Meanwhile, these rooks are going to be here stuck, protecting, or let me use the word babysitting the pawn on d5. And of course, we only have the two against the one majority that just wins for black. So it's still slightly better for white. I want to say winner, by the way. But the idea of the b4 is to try to force this pawn to move either to b5 or to capture so that the square d4 is a weak square. So g6 is played. We have a3, keep protecting the pawn. The guy played so well against the GM. He just pretty much held his own. b4. Now it makes a lot of sense. It's trying to sacrifice the pawn. The idea is just to open up files for the rooks to use. The rook needs files ASAP. So queen f4, pawn push, queen to d2, putting pressure on the pawn, attack the pawn, pawn captures, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, queen takes, queen takes. Now we're here. Now for about maybe 30 moves or so, I'm just going to move this, make this go real quickly. This is completely even. I mean, completely even. I'm not going to say draw. It's even. Nobody has an advantage. But somehow the GM found a way to lose this game. So what happened? This happened. A lot of dancing around, a lot of aimless moves. The good thing was they were both protecting their weak pawns. The black pawn is weak, the black always has to protect. The white pawn is weak, the white as always has to protect. The 3 pawns here around the king, 3 pawns here, completely even. But guess what? Something magical happened. GM said, I'm GM. I'm going to try and do something. Okay. So a lot of dancing around. I'm going to move fast. A lot of dancing around. Note that all the pawns are still there. Nothing is moving. This GM started moving his king. Like the GM started moving his king. Like, okay, I'm a GM. Let me try and swindle this guy. Okay, swindle. Swindle in the year 2025. Okay, GM, all the best. So the GM started moving his king at some point. Let me keep going. Nothing happening. Nothing. See, the king is still around here. The king is like still staying. Okay. For most, maybe 30 or 40 moves. Just aimless moves. Nothing. Adley. Now, here we go. Now the king. Let me go back here 1 minute. Now he plays. Sorry. Relax now. Where are you running to? He plays f6. Even though it's still even. The point is, now you've actually cleared the second rank for black, the seventh rank. Now you've cleared that for some checks. If this pawn was on f7, there was no way there could be a check on the seventh rank. Now this pawn move, really, I don't understand the point. Maybe we can ask the GM why I made that move. So f6. Let's keep going. Okay, there we go. King to e6. What exactly are you trying to do here, Mr. GM? What exactly is your point? Let's keep going. There's one thing I normally say when I analyze games or when I go through games. If you have to move your king voluntarily or involuntarily at some point in time in a game, maybe you have to move your king. There's a problem because normally the king is not somebody that can move around fast. So if you have to move your king to some squares, there's a reason you're moving that king. And guess what? It's not a good thing unless there are no pieces on the board, unless you're in the end game, unless there are no major pieces or minor pieces that can bring some damage to your king. Fine. But there are pieces on the board, even as innocent as one piece each. Man, you're going to get in trouble, man. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. So let's keep going. Let's keep going. Just watch. Nothing. Now the king. Now we have a Superman king. I just said something earlier about the seventh rank. Now, if this pawn was still here, this check wouldn't be possible. Of course, the king's supposed to be here. But where in the world are you moving? What are you trying to do exactly? And this is another thing I always say. Look, know what you're playing for. If you're playing for the draw, just go ahead and get it. And I like the way the 2100 played. His name is Boulrens. He just, see, he's the one. He kept. He's been saying here. His king is on issue, not really doing anything, putting pressure on this king. Why? Because this king decides to move around. So hey, bad things happen. Now still over the king. Where you from the king side where it's saved by his own pawns to the queen side where it's open, where a queen check can pick a pawn and then everything collapses. Hey, guess what? That's exactly what happened in this game. That is exactly what happened. Check, queen takes pawn, I'm protecting my pawn. All of a sudden, I have a 3 against the 2. It's still kind of drawish, really, because for white to win, you have to move your pawn. You can't do that if there's always a potential pin on your king. It's the kind of drawish. But the thing is, once you make a wrong move, it's so easy to just keep making wrong moves. And that's like what happened in this game. That's exactly what happened in this game. Now still making moves. Check. Now wins. Why? Because I can create a pass pawn. 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 And the GM resigns. So what's the lesson in this game for us? The lesson is when you have a draw, take it. Like, yes, you could play for a win, but don't be reckless. I think the GM was pretty reckless in this position. And I want to really blame GM Adly. Adly is a fighter. But at least you have to know when to fight and you know how to do what? Put your sword back in. So I don't know what next game I'm going to check out, but that's the game I wanted to show us today. And interestingly, like I said, GM Adly was able to tie for first in this position. Good job, GM Adly, GM Basim, and of course to the eventual winner, winner GM from Algeria. All right, guys. See you soon. This is Dapsy Chess. We are back and we are going to be here for a long time. Take care and God bless.